Let me turn it to light.
Begin and take it from the top. Item number 1, Mr. Clerk.
Item 1, presentation of a verbal report from the Urban Land Institute regarding the reuse of the West Hall at the LA Convention Center.
All right. Please proceed.
Good afternoon. I'm Alex Rose with Continental Development Corporation in El Segundo, and I had the privilege of chairing last week's ULI Los Angeles District Council Technical Assistance Panel assignment, and we were charged by the city to look at alternatives and opportunities available to enhance the LA Convention Center in the event that the approved Farmers Field Activity Center is not consummated as planned. On behalf of ULI and on behalf of the panel, I want to thank the city for the opportunity to share our members' thoughts and expertise with you today. We have a brief summary presentation of the panel's findings and recommendations, a copy of which I believe each of you have at your seats, and then a more detailed and formal report will be delivered in the next couple of weeks. Since we have a limited amount of time on your agenda, and ULI LA fortunately has a very long history of working hand in hand with the City of Los Angeles on a variety of matters, we won't spend a whole lot of time talking about us or process, but we do want to thank the city, who is our sponsor on this. There are a number of both private and public stakeholders that were instrumental in making sure that we had the information necessary to tackle the assignment, and we very much appreciate all of that support. We also want to thank all of our panelists, a number of whom are here this afternoon, as well as ULI LA's leadership and staff. These ULI members volunteer their time to serve on these assignments, and we were very fortunate to be able to assemble an unusually large but typically diverse and particularly skilled group. Included developers, planners, designers, specialists in infrastructure, economic development, hospitality, convention and meeting business, marketing, and government. So our assignment, as I said, was to look at alternatives and opportunities available to the city to enhance the LA Convention Center in the event that the Farmers Field Event Center is not ultimately consummated by its October 2014 deadline. And what we called this during the session was Plan B. However, I think it is important to point out that at the end of the assignment, the panel came to the conclusion that many of our recommendations ought to be considered and implemented, even if Plan A does come to fruition. So we hope you will take those into account in your future work. So let me make some initial observations to sort of set the framework for the more detailed pieces to come. We started by looking at both the positive elements that already exist relative to the facilities and to the convention center's place in Los Angeles. And we also looked at what we felt were some of the deficiencies and challenges facing the convention center. So even though on the slides the good and the bad, if you will, or the good and the challenging lists are long, let me just pick up a couple of key points in each group. Certainly on the good side or the benefit side, we are in a centralized location within the region. Los Angeles is an established international brand and has a solid base of tourism activity already built in. We are sitting in an urban core with a tremendous amount of revitalization momentum. There is actually a sufficient amount of land and land use controls available to the city to effectuate the recommendations that we are asking you to consider. And as we've all seen, there's a tremendous amount of public and private investment going on in the urban core. On the more challenging side, what the panel determined was that the facilities really do not measure up to the competition. There are significant deficiencies in the number and configuration of meeting rooms and exhibition space. There is a lack of hotel rooms in the immediate area. There are missed opportunities for the convention center and the convention center campus to serve as a gateway and hub for regional tourism. And I would note that that's regional tourism that already exists and benefits the region. The facilities and the campus are disconnected from the rest of the urban core. There are some leadership, governance, and marketing challenges which we feel can be addressed to better effectuate the enhancement and viability of the center. And we think if you wrap all of that around, there probably is a need for a coherent vision and strategic plan for optimizing the facilities, the campus, and what it can mean to help grow tourism, meeting conference business, economic development, and creation of jobs. So, taking that as the context and looking at recommendations on a big picture level, what we did is we broke ourselves into three groups: a marketing team, which is responsible for identifying the opportunities, the demand drivers, and the other relevant matters which affect development of a strategic plan; our planning and design team, which translates those opportunities and demand drivers into physical ideas and concepts; and finally, an implementation team, which articulates the way and some of the tools to get all of this accomplished. And our big picture takeaways, or our macro takeaways, I guess is a better way to put it, would be that we are going to recommend, or we do recommend, that the city focus on building on existing advantages that the City of Los Angeles brings to the table, advantages and successes that are already in the market and don't have to be recreated from scratch. We are going to urge you to rethink the role and function of the entire convention center campus. We are going to suggest the addition of critically needed hotel rooms, upgraded and expanded facilities within the meeting and exhibition space itself, an alternative structure for governance, marketing, and operations of the facility, and finally, means for capturing the opportunities presented by connecting to the immediately surrounding neighborhoods, cities, regional amenities, area businesses, and demand drivers. So I'd like to call on our marketing team, talk about the economic drivers behind our recommendations.
Thank you. And my name is Bruce Bolton, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. Basically, in doing the market analysis for the center, we really built upon a lot of the history that we've got working with downtown and the center and the various constituencies here. And in the convention business, really, hotel room nights are a proxy for success. I mean, you can look at a convention center based on what it does internally in terms of its profits and losses, but that's really not its driver. Its driver, as both of you well know, is really room nights and the economic benefits that they create. In Los Angeles, so we looked at Los Angeles as a competitive both destination and facility compared with San Diego, Anaheim, and San Francisco. And in doing so, we looked at the size of the centers, we looked at the amount of contiguous space in the center, and we looked at the number of hotel rooms that are within a half mile of the center, because that's really the basic walk radius that people tend to look at. And the reason we said contiguous space is because the amount of contiguous space at a center is very, very important. A meeting right now, you've got a south and west hall that are basically separated by about a block in the concourse, and an exhibitor, if you will, who really drives the convention center demand, or a convention or exhibitor, really wants all their delegates to be self-contained in one facility. You don't want to lose delegates to, let's say, have a 5-minute walk to West Hall when you get distracted, get on the phone or whatever. And if you're an exhibitor, you don't want to be an exhibitor in kind of the satellite space. You want to be in the primary space. So in meeting planning or convention centers, the amount of contiguous space is just as important, if not more so, than total space. And that part is partly a driver of hotel room nights. We looked at Los Angeles, which has got 719,000 square feet of space in total, with the amount of contiguous space being 347,000, which is South Hall. And LA currently is running at a stabilized level of around 275,000 room nights, which, by the way, is 100,000 room nights higher than it was before JW Marriott LA Live. So we have obviously seen success in terms of number of room nights generated by the campus by just the addition of LA Live, and which proved off the theory that LA is a great destination. We have the airlift, we have the weather, we've got the amenity base, we've got all the other reasons in the world to be a great convention destination. What we don't have, frankly, as you'll hear throughout this conversation, is a great convention center and a number of hotel rooms in proximity to it that are supportive of that kind of a facility. By comparison, San Diego's got 526,000 square feet of total space and 526,000 of contiguous space because it's all one. It's actually it was expansion, but it's contiguous. They are now planning a third expansion of another 250,000 square feet to take them up to 750,000. And they generate, on a stabilized basis, about 750,000 room nights per year, or about 273% of what we get in L.A. San Diego is a great destination. It's got a convention center. It's got the hotel rooms. It's got the restaurants. It's on the water. It's got terrible airlift, and that, frankly, is a big detriment to them in terms of the convention business. They have a lot of other positives to us, but they also we have positives over them in terms of our airlift and population base and some other positives. Anaheim, 814,000 square feet. 670,000 square feet of contiguous space, and they record 365,000 room nights annually as kind of their stabilized level. We think that's understated. They agree that it's understated. They just don't have a good method of counting because they have so many people book outside blocks at this point in time. And unless you actually do surveys, it's hard to get a really good number, and they don't do those. But that still is 133% of what we have, and this is regarded as, again, it's a higher quality destination than Anaheim is as a convention destination. San Francisco, 738,000 square feet of total space, around the same size as us. They show only 261,000 square feet of contiguous space, although that's a little bit misleading because that's doubled with it's the amount. The second room, 261,000, is not contiguous, but the walk to it is very, very short. It's through a passageway. So their contiguous space is 75% of LA's, if you looked at it that way. They do 810,000 room nights a year of convention business. They're a huge convention destination. Obviously, San Francisco is a great destination, but still, that's almost 3 times what we do on an annual basis. So they certainly are showing that there is potential for us to do a lot more if we can kind of get into their league. And the second issue that we have in LA, which is a bigger issue, frankly, is rooms, hotel rooms. When we were doing the studies for the JW Marriott, we all looked at that, realized that was a big challenge. And again, with the JW Marriott being there now, and the Ritz-Carlton, and also with the revitalization of the Lux Hotel across the street, which was the Holiday Inn, we now have roughly 1,532 hotel rooms in walking distance of the convention center, within a half-mile radius of the center. San Diego, by comparison, has 8,281. And just so, per point of comparison, of that 8,281, 4,500 are basically almost attached to the center in the Hilton, the Marriott, and the Hyatt. Anaheim's got 6,908 hotel rooms within a half-mile radius of the center. Again, more than 4 times our size. San Francisco's got 12,475. So you look at why San Francisco is doing so much better than LA. It's a combination of the destination, a combination of the facilities, and the hotel stock. But again, those are challenges we have at this point in time. But we think there's also an opportunity to really enhance the destination. And all of our basic analysis was we don't have actual numbers at this point in time. But we certainly believe that LA has got the opportunity to be one of the major convention destinations in the country. It's got all the assets to be there, except for the hotel rooms and both the design and quality of the center. we think that in going forward, you need to build on LA's creativity and innovation. The convention center needs to use technology as a tool to foster creativity and innovation. Again, and technology is a tool. It's not the we're not going to market this as a technology center because that changes all the time, and everybody could be in that game. But it's one of the issues we got to look at as a way to really enhance the center in terms of visitor amenities, make it user friendly, those kinds of things. Well, technology opportunities exist beyond just meeting support, but also as a business center and consumer showcase. We do think that basically LA's got to build on, as a portal to the LA region. Its location right next to LA Live. LA Live is really the center point of downtown Los Angeles from the tourism standpoint at this point in time. And the convention center's location couldn't be better, being right next to it. Right now, it's kind of hard to find access to the center from LA Live and vice versa, if you think about the way you walk. But we think that you could put a visitor center here, for example. One of our thoughts was to right on the corner of the center, if you redesign the center, is to the visitor center that used to be down at the Hilton.
Wilshire Grand.
Yeah, Wilshire Grand could be here, and this should be a place for tourists to be able to come to LA, get into, find out what's going on in the region, and really be a showcase and a distribution point for the rest of the region. We did sell LA and the downtown experience. Downtown Los Angeles, as you all know, has gone through a phenomenal metamorphosis in terms of restaurants and nightlife and entertainment and those kinds of things. But it's still a little bit hard to find for people, and we use this destination and location as a means to get people to find those things. And also, it's a way to integrate with the planning and programming of the LA's entertainment scene, so people know what's going on and can get to it and so on. So we need to, and also the convention center is a portal to the LA region. We need to really physically connect with regional assets such as neighborhoods, communities, beaches, mountains, cultural attractions, destinations. I mean, I know there's a lot of words, but again, there's a way to do that because there's a lot of people here at this location. And if we can move those people from LA Live into here and can integrate this better with LA Live, there is a way to really, again, make this a portal to basically all of Los Angeles and make it a much more visitor-friendly city. And with that, I'll turn it over to Peter, Bob.
Great. So one
Vice
of the
President.
things that I think that it's a
State your name for the record.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm Peter Bellal with Jones Lang LaSalle. One of the things that we really think is a very important distinction to look at is this kind of concept of does the facility itself want to become a jewel or a giant? And what we mean by that is, again, to earlier comments around, are we looking to take and really compete mostly kind of in the more of the boutique type convention arena in terms of other convention facilities, or really trying to be able to grab some significant portion of share of the larger conventions? There's probably an answer that encompasses both by using phasing, meaning that there are some things to kind of the jewel-like quality of some very successful kind of mid-sized facilities in the country of actually looking at the amenity side of the facility. We talked about it a little bit earlier, and being able to take and have better access points into the facility. One of the things that we also find from a design perspective is the common areas are fairly dead right now. Looking at how we can take and introduce, really high quality outdoor living furniture, Wi-Fi enabled facilities. Looking at one of the things that Los Angeles is really known for is this concept of kind of the higher end food trucks and things like that. And you start to go through these and you say, well, that's great, but there's a revenue issue and there's also a marketability issue, meaning can these facilities live off of just the convention traffic? So one of the themes we're going to talk about in the next couple slides is, I think, this disconnect with so many other portions of wallet, if you will, downtown is really an inhibitor today, but that can easily, I think, be overcome in terms of being able to draw income dollars, revenue dollars to support some of these amenities that we're going to talk about. If you think about three big constituencies that are really not served that well from this facility being here and with such a great location it's in, it has to do with this ever-burgeoning residential population that's downtown. It has to do with a number of the tourist/transient folks that are coming through downtown, because this is kind of considered one of the big boxes to check about when they come to Los Angeles. Where is the there? What is an icon or a focal point to come to? And then that third very important bucket is really our friends north in the CBD, actually, where my office is. And one of the things that we hear about constantly is, even if there were amenities here, how do you get down here? Meaning, how do you come down for lunch? How do you make that topic of connectivity really important? So, in no particular order, but kind of even just starting with the CBD component, while there is a dash bus and there's the planned trolley and a couple of other types of connecting vehicles, I think there has to be a very, very simple way for that all of those kind of spend dollars to be able to connect down here and really utilize some of these items that we're going to be talking about to stimulate this as a more inclusive facility rather than one that just kind of gears up for conventions. Those of you that have been to Denver and have seen their bus trolley line that kind of runs along, I believe it's 16th Street. It's not a glamorous bus, nor is the functionality rocket science. But on the flip side, it's very, very effective. There's no fare. It's a step on, step off. The point is, we need to think about how we activate Figueroa to truly be this linkage corridor, not just down to SC and pulling SC's traffic, USC's traffic up into this general South Park, LA downtown area, but very importantly, how do you get the CBD to view this as a real easy adjunct for these types of amenities, food and beverage, after hours, all of those options. You see that there's a connection desire there because you look at the massive amount of people when you have a Lakers, Clippers, Kings game or a concert activity, the amount of people that are even just walking down. And that's quite a walk. That can work for an evening event, but can it work for a lunch break versus some kind of a very effective flower fig shuttle that's clearly, has clear demarcation and is easy to really participate in. One of the other concepts that was touched on earlier was this topic around a ballroom. In addition to looking at the programming options for the phasing of the actual convention facility, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we go to some site plans that will help on that, but actually looking at a ballroom concept that is Figueroa frontage that has some form of an architectural merit to it that almost acts as like a jewel box, that acts as a front door. One of the challenges right now at the facility is where is the front, where is the entrance? And if you're looking at trying to also pick up incremental revenue from a ballroom facility, you don't want patrons that are maybe staying on hotels either at LA Live or along Figueroa to have to wander through maybe a darkened convention center because there's no activities that night, no functions going on, and try and meander their way to a to a ballroom facility. So a facility program somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 60,000 feet plus or minus, with frontage and some real marquee status to being visible on Figueroa. It A, acts as a front door, but B, also makes that a more compelling revenue generator from a use perspective. If we click to the next slide, I think we touched on a couple of these concepts, but again, there is the opportunity to really have this facility be much more of a vibrant urban partner with its locale than kind of this standalone island. And I think being able to look at those other revenue streams, on the food and beverage side, looking at how you also introduce maybe some transient food and beverage items or elements. We've done this with underserved commercial, suburban, and urban office development projects where by actually having some level of scheduling and repetition and rotation of food service trucks, these higher end food service components, you're able to actually draw in, again, those constituents that you want to help spend dollars in this area, not just the convention traffic. So I think that would be a really great pull for this local area and also for the folks that are coming down to the city of LA from a tourist perspective. A couple of other things we touched about. I think while some of the sites are already earmarked and are already in early phases of development or pre-development along Figueroa, the ability to have control where you can have control and influence on the type of uses that are adjacent to the convention center so that we don't end up with all residential facing a convention site, I think is very important. We also thought that the ability to take and have also look at options in the phasing for hotel rooms on the actual site, in addition to those that are adjacent to the property, not only can help to support that room mix that we need, that critical room count, but also give the facility some level of control over the programming, the ADR and price points for those hotel room nights to support the types of convention traffic. And then finally, as we touched on a little bit earlier, there is a real need And this has been confirmed not only from folks that have been part of this ULI effort, but also even from just third-party groups. There's a real need for this kind of a gateway concept when people think about coming to Los Angeles and really being able to kind of in one shape, form, or another have a centralized location that really describes what the region has to offer. It was interesting. I used to work for the Walt Disney Company. It was one of the things I remember during the programming phases for California Adventure. And you've seen kind of the ups and downs of how the programming on that, those of you that have been to that amusement park next to Disneyland have wrestled with. How do you describe what is this experience of coming to, there, in that case, California, in this case, Southern California, namely LA and the greater environment. But being able to take and, I think, pull in some sponsorship dollars, some key constituents from the private sector side that have obviously a vested interest in having that image and that voice conveyed. I think there's some ability here to not only have a revenue opportunity, but also importantly to create some focal point for these individuals that are coming in from out of town, whether it be families that are associated with conventioneers or an actual tourist element that has ended up in downtown, to have a gateway or a stepping off point that I think can incorporate some of these amenities. Bob's going to now take a look at or show you some of the images from a site plan perspective and some of the things that we've talked about and kind of the relevance to them to the site.
Thank you. Bob Newsome, HNTV. We looked at the study area that is defined by the 110, the 10 freeway, Figueroa, Olympic, LA Live to the north. And what we begin to recognize is the area between the South Hall and Nokia Theater and Staples is a substantial amount of real estate, and that asset needs to be optimized. It also needs to, I think, become more effectively knitted into the surrounding communities. As Peter mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of new residential activity down here. There are a lot of people who live here on the weekends, and we think that this center needs to be a center for the city and the neighborhoods. We see that being served in a major way by the growing transit system. With the completion of the regional connector in several years, we think that the light rail system will become a major regional service for the entire city. And this station right here, which is intended to be enhanced through redevelopment, will become part of that center, serving the convention center and the neighborhood around it. We also see that there is a substantial opportunity to expand the convention center between the present West Hall and South Hall, and that is something that we think should be encouraged, and I'll show you some images of that in a moment. We also think that to the north that there are opportunities for further development, as Peter mentioned, and tremendous identity between these facades from the southeast all the way along the west to the north. You get, what do we think, about 500,000 visitors a day passing by there, and we think it's a substantial amount of opportunity to advertise the city, the convention center, and Los Angeles. We see this as a gateway, and if we can go to the next image, what we begin to see here, now here's Figueroa, here's Staples, here's the South Hall. We believe that as we move forward, we would suggest that we complete a new Pico Hall that would be contiguous to the South Hall, meeting the expectations that creating about 300,000 square feet of new uses between exhibition space and meeting rooms, and then featuring on the far east edge, facing Figueroa, a major portal gateway marker, which is the new ballroom, suspended at the upper level, so that you have the Gil Lindsay Park in the foreground. We think that could be animated with a variety of activities, whether it's Friday night food trucks or it's other activities, that this becomes perhaps a point of orientation to the city as well as a gathering place for the community when it's not being used as a convention site. We would also suggest that the existing West Hall be retained as a long-term asset and reconfigured as an exhibition and meeting space as required, and then ultimately in the development continue to redevelop the convention center as a subsequent and future phase. On the very north edge, we have identified a site for a convention hotel located here that would be on the convention property. And we think that is, as Peter mentioned, not only a financial asset, but it's a functional asset to feed and serve the the convention center. We also see the very important pedestrian concourses that relate to not only the convention activities, but then connect strongly over here to LA Live and then to the east over to Figueroa, creating a new portal, a new entrance to the center. And let me see what else. We think that this phasing would allow you a long-term opportunity to grow the convention center as business demands, but by initially optimizing the convention center with the completion of a Pico Hall somewhere in this area between the existing West Hall and South Hall, as I mentioned. And now Larry Cosmont will talk about marketing.
Larry, before you do, one of the things I might add to Bob's description is if you look at that new parking structure on the west side of the West Hall, we took a look at a number of opportunities to even use that for additional convention hotel facilities as well down the road, and that certainly could be designed into that parking infrastructure from the get-go. Larry?
Thank you, Alex. Pleasure to be here. Larry Cosmont, Cosmont Companies. All of us worked very hard over a couple of days to try and figure out how to bring forth a series of conclusions that could be implemented. And implementation, I think, becomes key in being able to actually make these dreams a reality. The convention center and the properties are not competitive these days. We know that. And there's significant room for improvement. So whether it's you have a number of choices through design, uses, users, linkages, none of that really will work unless you can establish a fundamental core operating structure that isn't decentralized as it is today, where you have a number of boards and bureaus that aren't really accountable to each other. It won't happen without a strong CEO. And it won't happen without the ability to legislate and determine its own debt and be able to manage its future, the entity's future, without its own control over its resources and expenditures. And right now, unlike an enterprise department, the convention center department and the related boards really are at the women direction of the city council. The charter doesn't set this up as an enterprise fund. So whatever plan you choose, you're going to need, we think, to establish a structure and an implementation framework that at least mirrors the independence and the ability to manage debt and resources independently, such as an enterprise fund operation would do, like you have at the airport or LIDWP and so on. So what we are looking at on this, in terms of selecting the best menu of choices that this panel has identified, and more that you will come to as you move through the business of expanding the Convention and Meeting Bureau. The singular purpose authority, a singular purpose authority with a CEO that runs that authority is critical. The way that you can, I think, easily do it is to use Section 6500 of the Government Code and set up a joint powers authority and essentially figure out the start point economics of where you want this convention authority to go. And because right now you're looking at a department that's operating in a deficit that has, a bit of essentially voodoo economics to it, because there's forgiveness every year by the general fund in addition to the net operating loss. And there's a significant amount of annual debt that's being paid. You won't be able, I think, to hand over that package to a new authority and expect it to succeed. It's just hard enough to succeed in a competitive business not being $40 to $50 million in deficit on the first day. So one of the ways that you can, I think, move forward productively is to, take the vision components that have been laid out here and match it with a structure that has a strong CEO, has a singular board, can operate to manage its own financing, that it can enter into a long-term lease with the city and make payments, and when it's profitable, truly be contributory to the general fund, but independent so it can run as a business. The financing authority, the joint powers authority under the government code and even under our own charter would let that authority manage its own debt, issue its own debt, and would have to just do that pursuant to a series of operating agreements with the city and other entities. It also, by the way, could sublease to a private operator if it wanted to and leverage that long-term lease and participate in revenue. So there's a number of ways to go. So on the next page, all of this, in my opinion, and in the board's opinion, the group's opinion, is driven by the ability to capitalize on what's here: technology, healthcare, entertainment, media, education. These are the drivers of a business plan that, cry out to be, I think, exploited and leveraged to our benefit in Los Angeles, and they're not. Financing into the draft of these great, expanding and healthy businesses in Los Angeles, and the ability to attract more to visit the area and these businesses and interact with Los Angeles, should be a very straightforward platform once you've picked the right vision and the components and you've figured out that what you need is accomplishable, and then you're going to hit the financing program. And that's where the combination of a strong, centralized structure with independent financing authority can be essentially vaulted into, I think, success, one, by having that good business plan, which we started to identify here, and then number two, putting it together with a feasible financing plan. That could include, for example, a bump in the bed rate or the TOT tax. It could include looking at graduated levels of TOT based on distance from the convention center. It would have to include, and we think it should move at least on a timely basis, to pay off current debt and reissue bonds, because the debt environment's very productive right now. It could include selling air rights development. It could include sale of transfer of TDRs, naming rights, parking revenue, better use of sort of peak hour pricing on parking. And it also could look at a specific tax district for hotels, so that, you, in addition to simply raising the rate, but really looking at the benefit of having a taxing district that's tied to the operation of the convention center. There are ways to do this, but one way not to do it is to have 2 or 3 boards operating independently and a director operating without central authority over all those boards, having promotion arms separate from the convention center board, having no control over financing because you're operating through the general fund and through the city council's preferences and whims. It's just not the way to run that business. So in conclusion, we're saying that the opportunities on a planning, design, use, linkage basis, they're multiple. You can see them, and they're enriched by our own environment. They can be catapulted into a successful program, but you can't do that without, one, figuring out a structure that's going to persevere through the changes and the dynamics of a competitive business. You can't do that unless you structure an operation with a strong CEO that's accountable, with a board that's accountable and independent enough to structure its own debt, repay its debt, and contribute to the city's general fund in the long run. I think that's sort of the vehicle that we think can be done. We think the future's bright, and pretty much if you implement properly, I think you can get there.
Thanks, Larry. I think, as you can tell, we've just started to scratch the surface, and we're fairly confident that as the city starts to dive down into some of the threads that we have articulated this afternoon and others that will come to the forefront during those discussions, I would echo Larry's comment that this is extremely doable and achievable. Just to reiterate the primary focal points that we would urge you to keep in the forefront, we have to create a competitive facility that's got to be modernized and right-sized. We need an expanded stock and spectrum of hotel rooms. We need to meld the convention center's gateway and hub functions to help build on regional tourism and economic development and job creation. We need to connect the convention campus to the surrounding community. And lastly, a unified, focused leadership, governance, and marketing structure. We strongly applaud the city for being proactive in thinking about Plan B, but as I said at the outset, I think much of what we have talked about here can work not only in place of Plan A and Farmers Field, but as a complement and augmentation to it. It goes without saying that ULI-LA stands ready to help the city with pursuing this further, and we appreciate the opportunity to share our thoughts with you this afternoon.
Well, I appreciate it also, and I just wanted to say thank you for your interview process. It was very dynamic. Couple of things. Everything you said is very good, but I would just ask you, in looking at your catchment area, in the planning process, we did go all the way over into Pico Union, so it did not stop at the 110 on the west side. The other thing I would suggest is just in refining your approach. There's a lot of duplication with what we've already agreed to, so you might want to sort that out or extract that and then see what's left that you could view it two ways. One is you duplicate because you concur, and you're right. And whether football goes forward or not, these are things that should be done anyway. But just for your own planning purposes, I just wanted to note that for you. Let's see. Those are the only comments I had on that. And then, Mr. Huizer, you may have some comments. We also have two speaker cards.
Sure. Well, thank you. It
One.
was a very good presentation. And when it initially started, I was curious to find out what the recommendation would be, since when you lay out the problem, you try to figure out what the recommendation, we want to make sure it matches, right? I've heard a lot of speculation about what we can do under Plan B. But it seems to me what I'm taking away from this, the two biggest points that I'm taking away is, one, that we need an upgrade, a remodel, so to speak, not necessarily a tear down and start over, but more of an upgrade, just to enhance what is already here, taking the positive aspects of what we have and to upgrade and enhance what we have to achieve those goals as laid out earlier. And secondly, that we need a new governance structure, a JPA. That's what I'm taking away from this. And I think as we move forward, a JPA to me makes sense. I think if we are going to upgrade and enhance, it would do us no good should we not really take full advantage of what those opportunities provide and give the convention center the flexibility it needs to make quick decisions and quick action to move it forward. So sometimes I ask myself, I'm looking at El Pueblo, for example, and what exists there, and I ask myself, can the city do more to bring more tourists there, more attractions? And I've been thinking about doing a JP there as well. And I think if we do move forward, we have to ask ourselves, what comes first, the JPA or the upgrades? And I don't know. Or do they go on a parallel track? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts as we move forward. Should we move? If we do move forward on a parallel track, or do we need to do one before the other, and how does all that work? But I think I appreciate your presentation. It was very thoughtful, and I don't necessarily disagree with any of the points you made, so thank you for the information.
Thank you, sir.
Great. You can stay there for a second if anybody else has anything to add. We do have a comment from Joyce Dillard. Joyce, would you like to come up to the table? Take that seat right there.
This property was originally voted on by the voters for a sports facility and municipal auditorium to be, if not run by the city, to be run by a nonprofit organization with revenues to go to the reserve fund. That hasn't changed. That was a vote. It hasn't changed, but you are changing it through some of your actions, and I'd like to emphasize that while you look at this in the future. It's a shame that this group didn't interview the Los Angeles Convention Center Exhibition Authority Board. They are good. I've been monitoring them now for maybe a year or so when the stadium came up. They're very experienced, some 20 years from the county side appointments on it. They do care and kind of understand what is needed. You've missed a lot in this, and things like storage is very important to Los Angeles. The whole concept of LA being downtown is really hard for me. I'm a native. LA is not the center when you think of LA. A lot of people come up to me who come here, and they're interested in Hollywood or the beaches. I had to send someone on Venice Boulevard bus because it's such a poor area getting back and forth. Now too much traffic, bad roads, those transit's horrible. It's a joke. And I ride it. So I really don't see the vision yet from here. And I was with this group on the Union Station, maybe not the same gentleman, And you've got to expand what the needs are in the area. There are families, there are a lot of needs that really aren't addressed. You want to get the business section, well, that's what they're used to. But I've had women say to me they can't walk up the sidewalks with their kids here. LA Live is not the main thing in LA. I mean, you know, I grew up with concerts. Now you'll have the Forum as a competitor in that. It just depends what interest you come to for LA. Some things it's Disneyland, beach. Some things it's genealogy. I was here at the convention center with the Pentecostal, the Azusa Street revival aspect, because my family is from that background, and people from all over the world, they want to see the churches, and we had plenty of churches in LA, and that whole history of Los Angeles.
Time.
It really depends upon your interest.
Thank
I'll
you.
finish later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so that completes item 1, and if you want to stay, item 2, Mr. Clerk, if you'd read that into the record.
Yes, ma'am. Item 2, CLA report relative to an evaluation of future planning concepts for the convention center and discussion regarding the improvements necessary for the convention center to provide competitive facilities and amenities.
Good afternoon, John Wickham with the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst. Your CLA commissioned an independent review by Convention Sports and Leisure. They're a consulting firm that did work for the city on the event center and new hall project, and it made sense to bring them in on this review of concepts and concerns with Plan B. They do work with convention centers across the country. They would have been here today, but they're actually working on a privatization project at another convention in a convention center. So they have experience in this field and with a lot of different facilities. They've, for example, told us that a lot of convention centers are actually looking at improvements at this point because of the new Hall and Event Center project. They're concerned that Los Angeles is becoming more competitive, and they're already starting to look at the things that they need to do in their facilities to make our facility to remain competitive. Anyway, in the report that we received from CSL, they highlighted a couple of concerns that should be taken into account if we move forward on a plan-based scenario. And by the way, this report was provided to the ULI panel, and a lot of the information that you'd heard earlier was incorporated in their proposal or in their plan. So some of the key points that CSL raised was a need for the contiguous space, as was discussed earlier. They highlighted that the most desirable features for convention centers in the current market are breakout meeting room space. For example, medical conventions require a lot of meeting rooms, and a number of those meeting rooms need to be fairly large sized, and our convention center does not currently have the quantity of meeting rooms necessary to attract those types of conventions, and we don't have the number of large meeting rooms that would attract those conventions. A walkable hotel and entertainment district, so that when convention visitors are here, they're not just at the facility, they're out in the community, and the more walkable those streets are, and the more that district is desirable for them, the more they're going to desire to come to Los Angeles. A single exhibit hall is highly desirable, and that goes partly to contiguous space as well. Light rail access from the airport to the convention center was actually a significant issue for convention planners. The ability to get from the airport to the downtown, the convention center easily is a critical issue, and we are all familiar with the issues that have gone on with the Green Line. Now there's the Crenshaw Line, and those connections are being built. We need to find ways to make sure that those kinds of things are enhanced for this particular purpose.
I have a question for you. Is it possible for the CLA and ULI to, I guess, work together and look at our development agreement that we have signed with AEG, and again, I guess, extract out those issues that would be, under the aegis or under the umbrella of that agreement? I know Gilbert Lindsay Plaza and the activation of Gilbert Lindsay Plaza was extensively discussed in the development agreement. Because I think once we did a redaction of where the overlap is, we'd have a very clear checklist of things that we could begin to undertake that don't violate the development agreement and we could actually start thinking about moving forward on those things now, and not duplicating effort, because there are some obligations that AEG agreed to that need to be extracted from this effort. Gilbert
Absolutely.
Lindsay Plaza comes to mind just off the top of my head.
Well, absolutely. Some of the designs for the new hall, for example, include enhancements to the public space. One of the points in the CSL study that I'm talking about here was enhancing informal interaction space in the convention center, so that between meetings, people can gather in the lobby space and have Wi-Fi connectivity. They can sit down in a group of people and have an informal meeting. We don't have that now.
It's not in the, and then that's not in the development agreement. And those are things we could activate without a lot of infrastructure.
Exactly. We actually have a couple of those built into the new hall design that you've all moved forward under the Farmers Field project. So there are some of those things that are actually moving forward. But
Well,
your
even
point
simpler
to
is
align
the
them.
concept that they brought up, which I think is really interesting, the full concept of food trucks, and
Yeah.
using that to pull people and drag people into the space. Again, no infrastructure, just social media.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. Okay. Just real quick then, the gathering space that I just mentioned, and then the ballroom space that was discussed as well. We have the ballroom in the new hall design in Plan A. That's something that should carry forward in a Plan B, according to some of the input we have. So again, CSL, their recommendations at the end of the day were to increase a contiguous space, to create the informal gathering spaces that are service enhanced, to create the ballroom, and increase the amount of meeting room space as well as the number of larger meeting rooms. So those were some of the key points from that. So it's very helpful.
Okay. Mr. Weezer, did you have any questions or comments?
No, I'm not on this item specifically, but just generally what the next steps may be after.
I want to let
this,
Ms.
yeah.
Dillard come and speak, and then we can talk about that
Okay.
before we. Ms. Dillard, you also filled out a card. Thank you, Mr. Wickham. You filled out a card for number 2.
You need to look and see what's happening with My Figueroa, because they're reducing the lanes, they're putting the streetcar. You have problems with trucks coming in, you'll have even more problems with food trucks, you'll have problems with buses. My Figueroa people don't get what's happening here one way or another, or existing as it is. They want to design it because they've gotten the money. Gilbert Lindsay Plaza was part of that. I understand they're not going forward yet as part of the money. It's messy. This whole area was based on taxpayer money, the CRA, CDBG money. That has to be taken in consideration of what those commitments were. I've never seen a real accounting of this area. There needs to be an accounting that you ask for, and it hasn't happened. I looked at the council files, old ones, new ones, I've looked constantly. Never there to see really what this is producing now. So you ask for contiguous space. They've done it in many ways with the formation now, and yes, it's a problem, but they've worked around it. You had a good man in Phil Hill. I'm sorry to see him go. He really was. You haven't addressed the emergency management of this. This is a key place if we have a disaster area. What do you just forget it? Move it? I don't think you can, not with the density you're building around the area and the closeness of the freeways if something goes wrong there. So these things are very important to the people of Los Angeles. The old plan had an entrance down below. I didn't make the meeting on the new convention center presentation at Cultural Affairs Commission. I've tried twice to see it, once today. They've canceled out on me. I walk in there twice. Can't listen to the tape yet to see it. I won't visually see it. I may see it in a LA Convention Center and Exhibition Authority meeting. But I just don't think the groundwork's being laid here. I think it's all politics. And I think if you really talk to the people, see the needs, see what they've done, not lose your good people because you've lost your staff because you want to privatize into the concept of getting better conventions. Back when we had 9/11, they changed this to attract a lower business because they knew people weren't traveling. You need that kind of flow in the planning of this if you want anything to work.
Thank you very much. Let's see, Mr. Wickham, I wanted to ask you if you could just come back to the table. This has been a tremendous, go ahead. a tremendous exercise, and I don't want it to just be an exercise and hang out there in space and nothing come of it. And I'm willing to put together a motion that we can introduce and ask Mr. Huizar to co-present it if he'd like. Again, I'd like to see what's left after you back out everything that we've already agreed to, and including, I know that the development agreement, I think it has a proposed governance structure, and I think that the taxing district issues have already been addressed. So I'd like to see what's left so that we could possibly engage in a demonstration project with ULI and maybe put some priorities together, especially those that don't require upfront cost funding, infrastructure building, but things that we can just be innovative about and pull together existing resources and pull them together through either technology or whatever.
Absolutely. And there are certain things that the city family is currently working on that play into this as well. I know the streetcar project that Mr. Huizar has been working on very hard improves what happens here. There's a streetscape element to that program. There's the My Figueroa Corridor project that has a streetscape element to it. I understand the downtown community plan is being being revised, and that would be a key planning document that should have this information incorporated into it. So I think it might be helpful if those kinds of issues and elements are brought together as well in the next phase for your consideration.
Okay, great. Mr. Huizar.
Yes, no, thank you. And I think, as was stated earlier in the presentation, that whether Farmers Field moves forward or not, there's some elements of this that we could still do either Plan A or Plan B. And I think it's critically important for us to continue moving on this, not only because of the economic benefits, but I think it would really enhance all the other additional improvements that have been going on in downtown recently. So I'm excited to see how this moves forward. We've got to continue moving forward on this one way or another, and I'm glad to see that we're having this type of attention from ULI. So I want to thank each one of you volunteers for your time, because your assistance in this is truly appreciated. But I'm really excited to see this move forward, because it's not only about this site, it's about downtown and the rest of Los Angeles. Whatever happens here on this site is going to impact us all around, with jobs, with opportunities throughout the area. So I'm looking forward to seeing this move forward.
So I don't have any. I don't have any other public comment cards. So John, do I know? Okay, Mr. Wickham. Actually, once you probably know the development agreement in your sleep. So if you, I know. Maybe we can even do a spreadsheet, a ULI column and an AEG column, AEG to the city column, and then, see where we can get some movement and use that as a basis for design for demonstration.
Absolutely.
And we would certainly be happy to devote the resources to participate in that and assist the city with that effort. Well,
what else would be really interesting in doing that is that we could identify, really work on some funding streams that, I originally did the sale of the air rights over the convention center, and there was a community benefits policy associated with that within, I can't remember what the radius was. Was it 5 miles?
I'd have to go back.
I can't remember, but it was enough that, yeah. Those are the kinds of things where we could move further out within the zone and, maybe expedite those kinds of efforts, start in the outer rings and then move in.
Absolutely.
There's also, in planning going forward, you might look at ways to monetize also all that building exposure along the 110 freeway, because you get tremendous opportunities for signage income if you're willing to use that.
Well, I'm willing. I think it's a tremendous opportunity. It's an interesting opportunity. Trade Tech has done something interesting right there at the corner of Washington and, what is it, Flower? Yeah. They've got a huge flat screen built into the side of the building, just showing showing the interesting things that are going on campus, and they have their outdoor classroom right across the street for the people who are climbing on the utility poles during their class. There's a lot of activation down there, interesting things to see that draw people's eye in, but draw them into the campus in a way that they've never done before. There's no reason why we can't do that over here. Those are lower cost efforts that we could make sooner.
Yep.
So let's put together this next step on Mr. Wickham, and then make sure that we incorporate ULI into that and see what we can get done. So that's the end of the formal agenda. For those wishing to comment on items that are not on the agenda, this is the time for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on items that are not on the agenda are encouraged to come forward at this time. If not, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.